going on today? Today is not our typical day. It's a Sunday. I know we don't typically do pre-records, but for this episode, which will be airing on the 26th, so this is going to be my Thanksgiving episode, and we have an amazing guest today. I'm super excited about this, and I'm grateful that he has taken the time to come on for an hour and discuss the paranormal with us. And once people actually start to hear this guy speak, they're going to realize that this dude has a way with words that is just fascinating to me. I've heard people say that I have a way with words, but this is like nothing compared to what this dude can do. So
yeah, I told you when we were talking about we're going to have him on. I said, well, last time I had him on the show, I knew he was really smart, but he's Professor Smart. He's brilliant. So, he just kind of floored everybody with that. So
yeah, it's going to be an absolutely great show, I think. I didn't write down any questions for this one. We're just going to kind of freeball it and go with it. So It's going to be fun. It's going to be a great conversation. Guys, welcome to the Paranormal Unveiled family, Mr. Michael Roscoe. Michael,
hello,
what is going on, brother?
Thank you very much for having me on today. I appreciate that warm and kind-hearted introduction. I'm excited to have this conversation with the both of you. Of course, I've spoken to Gwen on previous shows, but yes, Nathan, we've never actually had a chance to sit down and talk outside of just seeing each other at the Paracon. So thank you once again.
No, I am more than happy to have you on. Thank you for coming on. So I want to start off the conversation by asking you. I assume that it's an assumption that you didn't always have an interest in the paranormal. Is there something that happened that got you into wanting to research and look into the paranormal?
Honestly, my introduction into this subject at large occurred back in like the late 80s, early 90s, when, some of this information wasn't so easily accessible and you had to go to a library or have a friend who had a book. And generally, that's what I started doing, collecting books on certain hauntings. A lot of these were very much based in an antiquated senses. So they were famous cases like the White Lady in the Castle over in England, just things that people have been looking at for years upon years. And I grew this fascination once I really started listening more to Carl Sagan, eventually introduced to Art Bell, not in a very purposeful sense. It's something I stumbled upon. And from that point, I was absolutely hooked. But I always had this sense of intuition that I couldn't necessarily place until I was around maybe 11 or 12 years old, when this channeling started to come a little bit clearer to me. And within this expression, I told my folks, and my parents weren't incredibly spiritual individuals. They were more on the religious side, but were very open to psychic readings. My mother talked to one of her constituents and said that this woman wanted to read me at 12 years old and felt that it was very important that we had this event. So long story short, I did go for this reading. She told me some very general things about myself and perhaps my past, going into, old soul sort of verbiage and what have you. But she looked at me and said, well, you're a natural healer. I said, what do you mean? She says, well, you could do the hands-on healing. And we didn't necessarily have a typical name for it back in those days. Obviously, we know the modality is Reiki today, amongst other definitions, but it was hands-on healing for us. And she said, I have a gentleman who would basically take you under his wing and you could become this apprentice in a less formal sense than I'm making it sound, but let me introduce you to him. So she does. And I joined at 13, a healing group down in Willimantic, Connecticut, which we met every week. I think it was on Tuesday nights. I dragged my father to this half the time, but again, he was open to it. And that's when I started really becoming entwined with the world of energy and what we would consider the paranormal going forward. I ended up reading a book by Betty J. Eady called Embraced by the Light, and that really propelled me into not only the research, but opened me to experiences that have basically followed me ever since.
Interesting. I mean, and I've got a lot of books in my paranormal library, but I don't think I've heard of that one.
It's one of the most famous near-death experience cases that's ever been recorded or documented, and it took me a little while to find her, but I eventually did have her on the show about 2 years ago. And I'll tell you, that was incredible for me, because she was the woman who inadvertently had put me on that path. As humble as she is, she's just delightful.
Interesting. So since we're on that topic, and you brought up NDEs, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've noticed that a lot of people that develop psychic abilities later in life, it seems to be it seems to happen after they have had an NDE or a near-death experience. Do you think there's any kind of correlation or relation to people who have near-death experiences and the development of psychic or clairvoyant abilities?
Absolutely, because you are now put into a realm that's a lot more expressive, and it thins the nature of reality we understand in terms of the physicality. And you can find the same sort of affect with people who practice transcendental meditation, those who actually spend more time in the paranormal world intentionally. I mean, there are many different facets of different avenues that can be explored to come to the same effect, if you will.
Interesting. Yes, yes, I get exactly what you're saying there. So something that I like to ask when I'm on the topic of psychics and mediums and stuff, I know that some people will refer to themselves as a psychic medium, some people refer to themselves as a medium, some will refer to themselves as a psychic. Do you feel like there's a difference between a psychic and a medium, or is it basically the same thing based on the same premise, just different aspects?
I'd say there's a redundancy there, and it's more our brains trying to compartmentalize and understand that phenomenon at large, because there are many different aspects that are visited each time somebody decides to go into that realm. And yes, there are certain people who are perhaps better at premonitions or contacting certain deceased relatives versus archangels or going beyond that. So there are specialty areas within the world of clairvoyance that I think people sit underneath a certain definition in an umbrella sense, if you will.
Interesting. Yes, that makes sense. That makes sense. So can I ask you, what is your opinion on cryptids?
That's a pretty big one to approach here, but given the different cryptid that we could talk about, or the species, they each have their own lineage in terms of not only what we understand about them, even if it's as little as we have, in terms of their biology, physiology, how they live, but also the metaphysical end of things. So if you talk about Bigfoot, obviously this has been a phenomenon that has a physicality and yet is able to manipulate that so that it's not seen or perceived by our sixth senses, if you will. Others are here and not necessarily supposed to be. They're interdimensional. I've met many people who have had those type of experiences with beings that were there 1 second, and then the next moment they were absolutely gone, either to return again or never to be seen again. And the Dover Demon, actually over in Massachusetts, I'm sure you're both familiar with that, is a very good example. And yet at the same time, I believe that there are creatures that live deep within our hollowed earth, not necessarily hollow earth the way that people would describe Admiral Byrd in the way that his journey went, but like a cavernous earth where there are pockets of subterranean life that are not necessarily reachable unless we are very intentional about that. I mean, look, we drilled into Antarctica, into that ice, and I think Russia was the first one to get all the way down through this and finding this lake bed, which we now know it goes over 400 different lake beds that are underneath the ice, all harboring different microbial life at least. I think there's a very big possibility that there are areas that we just have not explored that does harbor some of this more what we would consider extraterrestrial life, or at least in appearance and existence.
Right. Yeah, and I could have worded that question a little bit better, because it is a broad topic. I mean, there's so many different cryptids out there. You got Bigfoot, you got the Jersey Devil, you got the Wendigo, you got Puckwudgies, you got all these different aspects. So I probably should have worded that a little bit less broad.
Well, that's okay. We started somewhere with it. I mean, you go into the world of Puckwudgies, this is something that is predominantly seen in two specific areas, in the Northeast and in the Midwest. And it's similar in its parallel nature to, melon heads, even though they're completely separate entities. I did have one experience with a Puckwudgie, the way that I would describe it, and this happened back in 2017 in Northborough, Massachusetts. Now, I have had experiences with the paranormal with entities that were non-human following me home, and I do believe, going on one of your original questions, that did thin the veil for me a little bit easier. And this particular evening, I was researching Puckwudgies because at the time I felt distancing myself just a little bit from the actual physicality would sort of give me a different experience, which up to a certain degree it did. Now, this night was a little bit different because as I was researching this, I started feeling a presence around me that was imposing. I wouldn't say it was menacing, but it was imposing. And it felt like it was right outside the front door, which I did not have any desire to open and investigate at that time. So I stopped researching it for the evening, hoping that feeling would go away. And my girlfriend at the time came home about an hour later came in the house, looked at me. She goes, "What's outside?" I said, "What do you mean?" She says, "This little 3-foot being in the bushes. I don't feel good about. What is that?" I'm like, "Well, for all intents and what you need to know here, I don't know." But I knew exactly what it was. And that's just part of the nature of a Pukwudgie. You can think about them and you literally call that energy to you. So
that's interesting, because I know that there's another Native American sect that has a similar legend known as the Memegwese. And it's a very similar being, almost identical in stature. I think the only difference is they don't carry around the quoted poisonous spear tips that the Pukwudgies seem to carry. But that's interesting that you could actually put out that energy as far as a thought and attract them to your location. So
That's
yes,
awesome.
and yeah. Again, I think that's part of the nature of that particular cryptid. It doesn't happen with all of them, but Bigfoot is also allegedly in the same boat with that. And some of the people that I've known to go out and spend a significant amount of time in the woods, claiming to be with certain tribes, have reported this to me as well.
yeah, and Bigfoot's all a whole other being altogether as far as the interest of that goes, because there's so many theories as to what it could be. Some people say it's a flesh and blood animal. Some people say it could be a gigantopithecus. You have people out there who say it could be an interdimensional being. You even have some people out there who claims it's a hairy ghost. Like it's so strange the amount of theories that people have about Bigfoot.
So guys, I have a question.
Yeah, go
you
ahead.
guys don't mind.
No,
A Pukwudgie, I know that they're not supposed to be in the southeast. What would be similar that you guys maybe know about that would be in the southeast? I live in South Carolina. And of course, I have a reason for asking, and I have not researched it.
So to my knowledge, that in that area, I don't know of any. But it's definitely worth researching.
I would say the same thing, echoing that sentiment. I'm not familiar with anything that's come out in that terms of parallel existence, but it doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't things happening down there. But just before we move on, I wanted to make one comment on the Bigfoot that Nathan just mentioned. There's no other species of cryptid that by state, by country, by province, has its own strain of lineage. Where you have a skunk ape down in Florida, you have different looking Bigfoot up here in Connecticut. We have the barefaced Bigfoot. So to me, there's more credence in that overall evidence because we are classifying these different sightings as the same species but different lineages. So I just wanted to put that out there.
No, that's a great point. That's a great point. Because, in Florida, you have the skunk ape. In Alabama, I think it's called the wood booger. Up here, you have the wood devil. In Australia, you have the yowie. You have the yeti. You have the orang pendek. I mean, it's everywhere.
Yes.
And it's very intriguing that all these different cultures have this same creature, but yet there's so many people out there to say there's no way this thing exists because we haven't found one.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. Allegedly. So when it comes to the paranormal, do you think you've ever had an experience as far as contact with a spirit or seeing a spirit that just made you step back for a second and go, wow, what was that?
Yeah, all the time, to be quite honest with you. And it started with these investigations back in 2008 and 2009, where I went to 2 separate locations that had these non-human entities, and they ended up attaching to me. The first one I knew about, this was from the Rutland State Prison Camp, which I don't recommend anybody go and try to find, because this was brought into this physical space by a group of people that had no idea how to put it back from where it came. So it just sort of wanders around the property and is very predatorial.
And that's in Vermont, correct?
No, this is in Massachusetts.
I've heard of it.
So I'd been there countless times, upwards of 15 to 20 times prior to this happening, but it just so happened that we were filming a pilot for a television show at the time, so I really wanted to get this location. So my other investigator, who is no longer in the field, had mentioned that there was another investigator that had gone about 8 months prior that had this thing exorcised off of her. She was dealing with it for the better part of 1 year. I only got it for 3 months, thank God. But I mean, I've talked to her as well since then, and we have a lot of corroborating characteristics that we know of this specific entity. So we know it was the same one. And of course, being smart, I didn't go over to the area I was told not to go. Unfortunately, it came to us. And I could see it in physical form. I could see it even more prominently in my mind's eye. It came with what I would describe as legions of smaller energies that seem to be uniform in some sort of discipline. And this phenomenon surrounded myself and my team before this other entity walked into the dwelling that we were in, which was the root cellar. And the entity itself was probably about 7 to 8 feet tall, hulking, big, dark red eyes and he had an anger, a fury that I've never come into contact with before. There was no casual communication. It was always screaming at the very top of the lung. And that was my introduction to that entity. The second one, I went to a graveyard in Douglas, Massachusetts, and this was with a group of people. And, you know, I never really wanted to travel with that many people, too many energies getting involved. And at the time, I didn't even realize that one girl had had her own exorcism experiences years ago. This lent, I think, to whatever we encountered there. But what I've come to realize is that particular one was what we know as a watcher spirit. So that watcher spirit doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the site itself, but it's been assigned to protect it. And for whatever reason, it came after me. Now, the curious thing about this is that back in 2022, I believe it was, I had the feeling to revisit this graveyard. Now, I can't go back to Rutland because the other investigator I mentioned did do that, and she got that thing again for another year.
Oh.
So I've just decided never to go back to that location, unfortunately.
That's fair.
Yeah. But this other one, I had a feeling that I could perhaps create an ally with the way I would move forward with this. So I dove into meditation and I astral projected to visit that site. And I saw a myriad of different energies there who all kind of looked at me and going, what are you doing here? And I stated my purpose. I said, I'd like to come back. I'd like to make amends. I did not mean anything disrespectful. I'm coming by myself and the original person who brought me to this location. And I'd like to, smooth this out. So I was given 3 things from Spirit to do in order to make this happen. The first was to make a small donation to the town regarding the keeping of this graveyard, which was no easy feat because it took me a while to find somebody in town hall who knew what this graveyard was. Bring flowers, leave them at the entrance. Okay, was the second. And the third was tell no one how to get to this location. We don't want to be disturbed. So I followed that protocol. And sure enough, I did revisit this graveyard. And while I was standing by the one grave that purportedly holds the last witch that was executed in Massachusetts, I began to feel this energy come up around me. And if you've ever been in a paranormal location where there is this energy, it's unmistakable the way that it just kind of flows over your body right up to the top of your head, and it can undulate or pulse as you feel this and grow in intensity. So I'm giving this monologue as my friend is filming me, and I kind of start laughing. I'm like, it keeps tickling me. I can feel it on the side of my face, and he starts giggling too. I'm like, well, do you see something? He goes, yeah. So what do you see? He goes, it's standing right next to you, lapping at your face like a dog. So ever since, I've been welcome to go back to that location because I actually turned that experience around. So I thought that was very significant.
Yeah, that's absolutely significant, and it's such an interesting story because, like, you don't really hear about that too often when people can take a circumstance and then kind of switch it around to work out to where you are actually welcome in a location where you typically would not have been to begin with.
That's right.
So that's a very significant thing. And for the record, for touching on what you said earlier, whether or not you had this attachment for a year or 3 months, 3 months is too long. Attachments suck.
Yes.
Yeah, it felt like a year. We'll put it that way. And what it did to myself, my body, my mind, the way I slept, the way I ate, it didn't just affect me, it affected other people around me, including my immediate family. So once I saw that and I heard in my head, see what I can do? I said, I'm not challenging you. I didn't even want you to be here, but it said you called and I came. So that's something about the spirit world that people don't understand. You can go to a location and of course, time's over. Once you put out that extension, it may not happen right there where you think it should. It might happen a week from now while you're sitting in bed reading a book, but they come. And once they come, they honor that. You need to honor what you called them for.
Yes.
Now,
and that's absolutely true. And that realistically can happen at any single location that people go out and investigate as paranormal investigators. You can call out to energies that you don't even know you're calling out to. And that could happen anywhere, not just cemeteries, not just old prisons. Like, it could be just a regular abandoned building you're walking through. You have no idea that there's even a spirit there. And you're calling out to it for some way, in some manner. And then it's like, hey, I like this energy and I'm going home.
Yeah.
That's
I had
right.
one come home with me from, I used to be a paramedic. And I know I had told you that before when we had you on the show. But I had, and back then I didn't accept all of this. I could see things when I went to, and I did not accept it. So it was very odd for me to come home, and I was sitting in my living room, and I won't forget it. My children were playing and they were doing their thing. And all of a sudden I felt this rush of cold air, and it was almost like it ran in and just stopped right in front of me. And it was like cold enough where I shivered, and I didn't know what was going on. And I was kind of freaking out. And all I knew to do, something in me told me, I had a crystal necklace that I wore. Somebody had given me years ago. Like I said, now I had not accepted any of paranormal, any of that before. And I grabbed it and I put it on, and I called my grandmother, who was alive at the time, and she was very religious. And I asked her, I said, will you pray for me? I don't feel right now. And she did, and things leveled out. Well, the next time I went outside, I experienced the same thing. And I just said out loud, like I said, now, for what reason, I don't know, because I didn't believe in all this, but I said, I don't know what is going on, but, you know, whatever you are, whatever's happening, you know, it needs to stop, and don't be around my children. And, I would say this when I went outside, and I guess it just understood that I was confused and didn't know. If I had done something, I didn't know I had done it. Well, I went back on my records, and I had went to this really old property and picked up this lady who was, we basically took her to hospice care. And from what I get, that was her protector or and I was the last one that was with her when she was still conscious. And that's all. Through the years, I have thought about it so often, and I figured out that I guess I was the last one. So maybe it was like, okay, maybe I'm passing to you type of thing. But it all actually now, funny enough, occasionally I will feel that rush, and I can speak to it and say, hey, you know, you remember me, I remember you, we're good. And I will leave like crystals sitting around where it likes to be, and just things like that. And when I go to cemeteries, I also do the same thing. I leave crystals or little flowers, or if I know there's children's spirits there, I always try to leave something to show them that I'm there to, you know, and we even clean up, like if we see branches down and that kind of stuff. I don't know if you guys do that, but I always try to make it where, hey, I'm coming in peace here. I'm good, you know? So yeah, smart or not, that's kind of how I approach that kind of stuff now.
So funny thing is, Mike, I think this is the most I've ever heard her talk on my show.
Well, I am on shows. I produce them. I have my own, which I have not started back yet. And I tell Nate, this is your show. I'm your co-host, and I'll pop in. Yeah, and
it's my guest show. I'm just the guy asking
questions.
That's
true. That's true. We're hosting him, and he is awesome. So, you know, when I had messaged you recently and said, hey, you know, would you like to come on before Salem? Nate picked it up, and I was like, yes, because, you know, me and Nate think, okay, I had this funny thing happen, and Nate's going to flip out. Somebody called you my work husband. They said you and Nate pop off at each other so much. I'm not
going to flip out about it, because if you didn't know us personally, if you actually standing there listening to a conversation between us, I can see the correlation.
Yes.
So,
and I said, well, you know what? I'll take it, because I love his girlfriend so much, and she would probably have to go to the bathroom and pee herself. I mean, she would laugh. She would absolutely laugh. But somebody told me that, and I was like,
oh, she would definitely laugh at that.
They saw us at Broadhead Manor, and they saw us in Connecticut together, where we got to meet everybody, and they were like, yeah, you guys really do have that little thing. So I was like, yeah, we do. Makes it cool.
It works.
Yeah. So I'm gonna let you guys take over now. Shut up.
All right. So since we were on the topic of things following people home, Mike, right? Let me ask you. I'm going to go into the typical question that a lot of people have mixed answers about. Ouija boards. Do you think that they attract things, or do you think that they are inherently evil, or do you believe that it's the mainstream media pushing the inherently evil aspect onto us based off of movies and stories that they tell?
Honestly, I think it's a little bit of all of that. Yes, the Ouija board has been demonized in mainstream broadcasts and movies and so forth, but I do believe that your intention is what brings about your experience in many cases. The clearer you are with your intention, the more defined an experience you may have. And that also includes in what you attract. So one thing I got into many years ago and talking to different clairvoyants was that you could use something that resembled a Ouija board, at least the mechanical device or the mechanics that are behind it. But what you needed to do was make your own. So your energy goes into it the same way that your energy goes into your food. Okay.
Yes.
Because that's what you're going to absorb. Now, I've never used, a Milton Bradley brand Ouija board because even as a youngster, something didn't feel right about that. It's more unhinged to use something like this that's been created and manufactured in a much more global sense of usage rather than something specific for somebody or a particular location. And when I've made my own, I've had those experiences of the planchette, which I would use an upturned glass to, slide along, and I would get, some answers here and there. Nothing was completely clear, but what was clear to me was that this was an avenue of channel, but it was outside of ourselves. So anytime you're using a peripheral device to communicate, that's an extension of yourself, but it's not identified as you. And the intention that you put into that really does shape the experience again that you have. So while I would never recommend that anybody use a Ouija board that way, there are so many other avenues to take in terms of connecting with spirit that are available to us today. It's now archaic to me to look at something like that and say, this is the method that we should use. It's dangerous. You don't know what you're getting. You don't know who you're getting.
You don't know what energy's already on it from somebody else either. That's the big deal with me. I don't.
That's another thing. I mean, I have a good friend who you both probably know, or at least one of you, Rich Giordano of Goof On, who
I've heard of him. Yes.
Yeah, who's opened up Ouija sessions upwards of 500 different times and never closed any of them. Well, at some point, his throat started getting really sore. This is about 6 years ago. And it was to the point where he ended up having to go to the hospital. And when they did the initial checkup, they said, this is a weird question to ask you, but are you a sword swallower? He goes, no, what do you mean? He goes, because the inside of your larynx and your trachea, it's all bruised, like black and blue bruised, like something has been grabbing your throat or you've been swallowing swords, jamming something in there. And he said, no. And since that time, he's fallen incredibly ill. And I mean, for now, again, looking at where he's just coming out of it now, about 5-6 years of being violently ill on a regular basis. And even the times that I would speak to him, personally on the phone, there were activities happening in his house in real time. And I kept saying, go back and close these. But there were 500 sessions. So people have these experiences, and I'm not saying definitively that that's what caused this for him, but on the tip of our tongues, this has been, a reason that he's undergone what he's undergone, honestly.
Yeah, and I feel like for me, not closing your session if you decide to use a Ouija board is one of the most dangerous things you can do as far as spirit communication using one of those devices.
Yep.
That's right. Absolutely. And people need to understand that. If you're going to open a door, you have to shut it. Otherwise, you leave the door open to your house. Okay, you go to bed at night. Well, the next thing you know, you wake up in the morning, there are raccoons and all kinds of wildlife in your house.
True.
I would welcome a raccoon.
Yeah, that's different, right?
I would welcome a raccoon. I do love me a good trash panda.
Oh no. Yeah, they're cute, but they're make a mess.
Oh, I know. But so going off of the theory, speaking of the Ouija boards being, a divination style tool, and they are kind of archaic, like you said. So would it not, in my opinion, this is how I look at it, any tool that we use in the paranormal is technically in a format of divination tool. So realistically, anytime you use any kind of equipment, whether it be dowsing rods, whether it be an EVP recorder, voice recorder, anything that you're using, you should always, at the end of your investigative session, when you go to leave a location, ensure to close that spiritual doorway. Make sure they not follow you home. I feel like it's a huge format of protection that gets really overlooked.
I do it every time.
Yep.
I do it every time.
You have to, because otherwise that's when you run into problems, and it's easier to truncate something like that initially than it is to deal with it after the fact.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, even with my entities, especially the first one, I talked to that investigator who had warned me about this. I said, look, I think I caught this thing. And he kind of laughed. I'm like, what are you laughing about? This sucks. He goes, no, well, now we have a whole process to go through. I said, well, where's that start? He goes, what's your home look like? Like, what do you mean? He goes, is it tidy? Is it clean? Is it messy? I'm like, well, it's a little bit of all of that. I've got, a girlfriend with a small child here, so we're kind of living by the seat of our pants in that sense. He says, well, you would have to clean your house top to bottom before we even came in there and started looking at a cleansing that we would, then get into. And it just wasn't a feasible thing for me. So I was really on my own with this. And it was up to me to face and take responsibility for what I had done. Even though it wasn't my intention to connect with this one, I still had to reap the repercussions for those actions.
Right. So I don't know if y'all heard that, but right as you started speaking, there was a noise that came from this side of my room.
It's Ethan.
Oh no. I'm pretty sure it was Ian because it came from the closet.
Ian, not Ethan. Oops, sorry, Ian. Yeah, he's wanting he's wanting to talk to Michael.
Oh well, he'll get his chance. He's coming to Salem.
Yeah, well, I was gonna say he just have to wait a little bit.
Yeah, so I don't know if you know that, Michael, or not, because I don't really market him. I have a haunted clown doll in my closet.
Interesting. No, I did not know that.
And he won't give him to me, so.
Nope, I don't market I don't market it out there because I don't want to be known as the guy that has a haunted object. You know what I'm saying? That's not what I want to be known for. But he got such a stir at the main Paranormal and Horror convention that Mr. Danny Perez convinced me to bring him to Salem with me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I mean, Danny knows what he's talking about. And if anybody is out there that I trust in this field, it's definitely Danny Perez and his wife.
Oh, yes, for sure. And what we've realized over the past several months is Ian plays off of people's addictive personalities. If you do not give him attention and you have some kind of an addictiveness, it really ramps up. Like I've realized that, I drink from time to time. If I go a week without giving him attention, then I will start drinking heavier and heavier and heavier. But as soon as I go and give him attention, it slowly calms itself back down.
Interesting.
When's the last time you talked to him?
A few days ago.
Okay.
But yeah, it's an interesting aspect because I've never seen or heard of an object that does that.
I've had experiences where, I would enjoy some libations and, maybe there was a period of time I was doing this, every other night or something like that, either with friends or, whatever I'm doing. And there was an entity around me, or at least within my house, that seemed to enjoy when I would get into libations. And I wasn't bothered, but it was when I stopped or took a night off or said, I don't feel like doing this, that's when that thing would come around. And I imagine that there was some sort of feeding off of my vibration for that entity, perhaps even living vicariously without the body, but maybe having an incarnation where alcohol was a part of that one's existence and now is missing it. We've heard many reports of different spirits reaching for empty glasses in vain, trying to take a drink. You see them in bars, especially. And a lot of these are just sort of earthbound spirits that don't really know that they're dead or don't really have the sentience to kind of put together what has happened, and they're going through the motions. But yeah, I've experienced just the opposite of that, but that's very curious, Nathan.
Yeah, so when we were at Maine, we realized that he got a lot of attention. I'm talking about, I saw multiple pictures of people who stopped with him, and I didn't even know they had stopped because I was wandering around. I can't sit still. So, but when I was at the table, because I had him set up in front of the Radicals' hearse while they had it in the building. And so when I was over there, what I realized was people were walking by, kind of looking at the object, and then they turn around and come back to it. Like they would, what they would tell me was they felt like they were being called to come back and give him attention. And I'm like, okay, well, I started giving the backstory and giving the history that I know about it as far as what it does, is what it affects when it comes to people. And the odd thing was almost every single one of those people that turned back around to come back and see him were either a recovering addict or in recovery.
Oh.
That's curious.
That is.
That's very curious.
Yeah, so it's a weird thing, but I made sure that as I was going through, and they were like, "Well, that's weird that he played off of those." I've been in recovery for X amount of years. I just recently started recovery. Oh, I go to Alcoholics Anonymous every week. So it was a weird trend that we put into place.
Well, this may be a more of an expression of the character of that particular entity. As we're kind of spitballing here, we don't know much about his life, I would imagine, but we can infer certain things, at least in terms of what that one's desires may have been in physical form. And perhaps there's just a connection with that frequency with people on that path.
Perhaps. I know we're doing an experiment. When I bring him to Salem, he is not coming home with me. So he is going home with the Radicals for a year.
Okay. All right. I'd love to see what becomes of that.
Yeah,
so
me too.
we're running an experiment, and the plan is, if everything goes as we think it's going to, because I've been logging what happens with Ian for like the last year or so. Danny's going to do the same thing while he has him. Him and Lauren are going to keep a little notebook and log it, and then we're going to get together after this time frame and compare notes.
That's
fantastic. That's
so
fantastic.
And then Ian's going to come back home to me. I don't want to get rid of him. John Zaffis wants him very badly. John Zaffis said that if I allowed him to have him, that he would let me film a live podcast from inside of his museum.
It's a good deal, but a hefty price.
Yeah, I don't think I want to do it, but I don't think I can. I don't think I want to give him up yet.
No, I don't think so. So I have a funny story that Michael might not remember. When we were in Connecticut, we had our haunted doll with us. Her name is
Of course, I remember this.
Yes. So we're sitting there, and he's like, not straight across from us, but more like at a left. I'm looking at the front of the, I'm looking at the other tables, and he's kind of a little bit to the left. But we were sitting there, and Thomas Gormley walked up, and he said something, and have you got to talk to everybody? And I said, man, it's so hot in here. I've been running around trying to speak to people, but it's kind of exhausting. And we were talking, and we said something about this one right here, and I swear to you, he could not have heard us. And he stands up and he walks over there. And I looked at Thomas. Thomas looked at me, and I was like, dang, did we talk too loud? And he hear us and think we were talking about? And he said to me, no, your doll winked at me like 3 times. And I was like, that's my girl. That is my girl.
That's
awesome. Trying to get people to come over.
I actually truncated a conversation I was having with a patron who was sitting next to me because this just kept happening. I looked over the first time and I thought I saw the wink, and I'm like, well, that's far enough away. Maybe I'm just seeing things. So I go back to talking to this woman, and curiosity gets the best of me. So I look back over, and sure enough, I see her wink another 2 times, and I'm like, okay, I think I got it. And excuse me, I have to go and check this out real quick. I'll catch up with you. And that's when I got up. Because just like you had said, Nathan, sometimes there seems to be some sort of calling towards.
Yes.
And that's what I felt as I was, in that experience and walking up to her. That was a very interesting experience for me. And I've talked a little bit about it on other shows since.
Oh, nice. But I'll never forget it. It was very, very interesting.
Another aspect I think you would find interesting, Mike, and I can send you the pictures when we're off the show. I did an experiment with 3D mapping, trying to see what would happen if I tried to 3D map Ian the Clown Doll. Mind you, I don't take him out of the case. This is probably the second time I've ever taken him out of the case. We did 6 different scans using a 3D mapping sitescape is what it is, because my phone is slightly LiDAR capable, not fully, obviously, because it's not a LiDAR device. But we mapped it 6 or 7 times, and the third map, it mapped 2 separate figures with different facial expressions.
Okay, now you're onto something.
And I don't exactly know why it did that, because I've never had this program double map anything, and I've been using it for years.
Well, I mean, if you go back to, I forget the exact name of the practice, but there are people that are wandering around the country with a specific type of camera that can capture auras. And one of the things they tell you outright is that the camera does not have the functionality to capture white. Okay, it can capture other colors, but it cannot capture white. And yet, when you're placed in front of this camera as that biological entity of energy, you sometimes get a lot of white in the photograph. So I think the paranormal can act in that way, and we can capture it through certain mediums, if you will, that are completely invisible to the naked eye. So that brings sound to me.
Interesting. That's actually a really, really good point. So can I ask you, out of your paranormal travels, is there a location that you've ever visited that you would deem to be your favorite spot?
Yes, I would. I'm creating a documentary on it right now. And without giving the exact location, because I want to protect this for a multitude of reasons. And I'll tell you both off air. I'm doing that. But by and large, I don't want this place to blow up any more than it already has. But I will tell you, it is an abandoned psychiatric hospital that is easier to go into and explore, even though that's still something you're not supposed to do. Because of its location, you can kind of get away with, an hour jaunt in and out, whatever you need to do. But it has a very sordid and dark history, and it deals with, I'll just put it this way, it deals with children. And, obviously this is something very near and dear to my heart, having 2 children myself and a nephew. you go into this particular place and you can feel the thickness in the air of what has happened, and yet it's very distorted because there's so many energies and frequencies crossing over each other. And even going in there the first time I did by myself, there are a handful of buildings that can be accessed throughout the property. I was getting all sorts of different indications that there were presences there, including feeling like I was being watched, followed. There were these pops and clicks that were happening in the environment, some of them close to me, that were associated with a pressure that would hit me, perhaps in the head, at the moment that you heard this sound only feet from you. There were doors opening and slamming as I'm walking through this place on my own. And subsequent visits have produced the exact same thing, even bringing one other person along to experience this with me. But yes, that is probably my favorite place, and it's sort of a dream come true for me because, again, even though you're not necessarily supposed to be going into these constructs,
Right.
if you're safe and you take the proper precautions, you can get in and out without any real problems.
Right. And I feel like when it comes to what you're calling, some people will call it urban exploration, whatever you would like to word it as. My only issue with that isn't the fact of people going in there and damaging the property, because if you respect the property will respect you. That's just, to my eyes, that's the way it works. But my thing is when you let it roll, not just the paranormal you worry about. You have to worry about, are people squatting there? You have to worry about, are people just hanging out?
Oh, absolutely. That has to be at the forefront of your mind. Forget about the paranormal. You got to worry about other people first. And in vetting this place, which I did extensively, I found that where it lay, it's not a very accessible place for people of that ilk to find some sort of home there, if you will. It's sprawling. It's absolutely sprawling. But you're right. You have to be careful of that.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people would do that. They rush into these places. Like right down the road from me, maybe 5 minutes, there's an abandoned scythe mill. Place is really cool. I go in there and explore it all the time. But it's falling apart. So it's more of a danger of going in there just because of the conditioning of the actual facility, not necessarily because you're going to run into people. You know what I mean? So that's another factor.
Yes, and again, when you're vetting these places, you really have to take stock of the condition of the buildings. And one of the reasons that authorities don't really want people in the buildings outside of the obvious is, the fact that there's lead in the paint, there's asbestos everywhere. The reason that these buildings aren't being raised, or at least a partial reason, is because of that asbestos and how much it would take to clean that up. We're talking millions upon millions and millions of dollars just to restore one of the buildings, let alone the rest that are on that particular property. Right. But thankfully, these buildings are very sturdy. They were built back in the earliest part of the last century, and most of them are cement and brick. But some of the wood and roofs are caving in and rotting away. So you just have to be mindful about where you're going and always watch your step, because you never know what the floor underneath you might actually be.
Exactly.
True. And when it comes to these kind of locations, I'm going to go kind of a little bit of a tangent here. Medfield State Hospital in Medfield, Massachusetts, for years they've been talking about possibly renovating this into low-income apartments. Do you think that's a good idea?
Well, they did it with Danvers, and I actually my brother-in-law's grandparents lived there for quite some years after they had renovated, and I've actually visited the buildings themselves. I think in a lot of cases, there's a precaution that you might want to address when deciding to develop on a property like that, or sacred ground involving Native Americans or other indigenous people. But developers don't care. They're after that dollar sign. And most people that move into a place like that don't have that awareness that that's what it was. Now, in Danvers' case, obviously this was a historic site and they kept the outside facade intact. So that main administration building still pretty much looks like an administration building from back in the heyday. But I've had mixed experiences with people who have lived in those places. Some have experienced paranormal activity, others have not seen a darn thing. So it really goes probably into the sensitivity of the people that are living on the property. And for those who are more sensitive, it's going to be a hell of a time.
Right. And that would be my concern, is people who move in there, knowledge of what actually was, and then they get in there and realize, well, what is going on that they don't realize that they have.
Absolutely. Or they're going through something traumatic, or they're already vulnerable in another sense. They're going to, have this opening within their auric field metaphorically, that will welcome in those type of experiences, especially if those energies are looking for something like that, because you have to look at the nature of what had happened on those locations to specify what those experiences could possibly hold.
Right. And that's a very, very good point. So let me ask you, since we know that the Salem Paranormal and Horror Convention is coming up very soon, so how did you get into DJing for this event? Like, how did that come into play?
So curiously enough, I used to spend hours just researching different people, or people would connect with me and say, I'd like to be part of the show. I like what you're doing, blah, blah, blah. So I would, go into that process. And I don't remember exactly how I met Thomas and Charles, but nonetheless, we did get into talks about doing a show. Now, enough, we missed schedules. We just had 2 different times that we were supposed to be on. And I got into it with Charles on the phone at some point, and we were yelling at each other back and forth. And, I use that word lightly. I mean, we had a disagreement, and he was obviously emotional about it because he wanted to come on the show. He wanted to be a part of that. And so, I apologized profusely, and I said, all right, let's just start over. Okay. Let's go on at this time. And we did. And Thomas came along, and that was my introduction to them. It was a short period after that I kept in touch with Charles, specifically at that time. And he said, hey, listen, I've got this Paracon that I do. I think you'd be a great host. I like the way you talk. I think your presence is, formidable. Would you be interested in doing this? Sure, and he goes, the trade-off would be exposure. And he talked, all right, that's enough for me. I don't mind. I can do this. So I think I've been involved for the last 3 years, pretty much doing every one of these Paracons. And maybe there was a day that I wasn't able to be there because I had my kids, but I was always there for at least the main event and the main speakers of those conventions there. So that's pretty much how I got involved with that.
I like it because let me tell you, you do a great job at it too. Like I want to give you that compliment right now. You're doing a fantastic job with it. So do you ever feel, or have you done enough of these that you no longer feel this way? Like in the beginning, did you feel nervous getting up in front of in front of everybody?
No, because, since I was probably 12 or 13, I've been a performance artist. So whether it's music, whether it's stand-up comedy, whether it's radio, you name it, I've always been on a stage. So I've been very comfortable. But just a note on that, if you don't feel a little bit of stage fright, a little bit of nerves before you go and do a performance, the performance it's going to flop. And for a reason, that mentality has always stuck with me, and I've always experienced it that directly, when I feel a little bit of those butterflies, I now see it as excitement, and I know what I'm looking at going forward because the energy is there backing me, and we're going to have a fantastic display, whatever that presentation may be. So just the opposite, if I'm not feeling, I'm like, uh-oh.
And that's 100% a good way to look at it, because let me tell you, I don't think there's been a time, and I've done quite a few speaking spots now, where I did not feel like that gut instinct that that feeling of the nervous, like you almost want to throw up, and you start shaking a little bit. I don't think there's been one time I've gotten up to do a speech that I didn't feel that, and I was thinking in my head, oh, I'm going to suck at this. This is going to flop, and it ended up going fine.
Yep. Well, you have that energy behind you, and it's not something that you can necessarily describe or put some sort of tangibility to. But I feel in those cases, just to kind of take it a little bit further into my own opinions, your guides, your energetic protectors, everything that is you in that larger sense comes and convenes with you in that moment. Because when you're on a stage, in most cases, you are very directly in the moment. You're not thinking about work, or you're not thinking about something outside of yourself. You're right there in front of that audience, providing them with whatever content that you're there to talk about. And being in that present moment is very powerful. And I think that a lot of people do experience that.
Interesting. Yes. So we're going to move on from that now, because I did have a question that I wanted to ask you before, because I see we got about 12 minutes left. So before we get into the ending questions, I had a few other things that I wanted to get your opinion on, just because I love the way you think. The way you think fascinates me. So what is your thought on people that, how do I want to word this? People creating energies, people thought forms, egregores.
Well, give me an example of what you're looking on here.
So, like, if you go into a location and many people have been there, and you're looking for one specific entity that no one is even sure it exists in that location, but so many people output that energy into that location that it almost resonates back, creating a spirit that wasn't there to begin with.
Absolutely, 100%. I believe that's a phenomenon. In fact, in many cases, there have been places that aren't necessarily haunted, but they act like they're haunted. And it might be a dynamic within the owner or the family that's living in that place. And this could go into the realm of religion, superstition, I mean, you name it. The intention behind this is so large that, you know, it's not something we can really quantify as of the moment. We just don't have the tools to do it. But because we are such larger entities than what we see in the mirror, exploration, and sometimes it's subconscious, we do create this. But not, you know, you mentioned multitudes of people looking at a specific place and that energy culminating. Well, I can bring a parallel to this: prayer. Okay, you get a whole bunch of people praying for one specific thing, and that energy is directed, pinpoint. That's more likely to manifest to the reality because the attention is there to make things at our core. That's what we come to, or we're destroying. It's still a creation of our own volition, but going en masse into that energy, you have so much more amplitude behind it. So yes, there are many places I would consider not necessarily in the traditional sense, but influence to the people, or maybe one or two notion about that place, or convictions that stand within the realm of the paranormal.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And I love the way you compared it to prayer, because that's a very good point. Some people call it speaking into existence.
Yes.
And I mean, that's a very valid point. But I feel like, for a good example, Waverly Hills, right? On the 3rd floor, they have a creature known as the creeper. I don't think the creeper is a spirit at all. I think the creeper, someone saw something that they couldn't explain, they put a name to it, and then so many people spoke out trying to find this energy that now that energy physically exists within the walls.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, hands down, that's what it is. I mean, you know, when I first heard about the creeper, I'm thinking like the lickers from Resident Evil, you know, and this is a very odd sort of configuration for any spirit, and unless something takes that sort of form, there's usually a reason behind it, and that's something that we strive to understand. But getting close to that type of energy, which people would consider demonic, which I don't necessarily call evil the way that people would normally look at it, because I mean, we've always had contact with spirits. You know, the indigenous people, and I've mentioned this on other shows as well, looked at these as allies, whether it was a dark entity or it was an entity of light, or, you know, something in between. They treated them for the purpose of what they were, and there was a synergy that went between them, the entity and the people, that served itself. So there wasn't really a threat the same way that we in our ignorance and blindness go into today, saying, "Are you here? What are you?" You know, we're sort of on a lower tier of that understanding at this point, that we're now trying to get back to in a different fashion. Okay, that again can be expressed in many different ways based on people's filters. So folks have to keep that in mind. And when we talk about definitions and who you're actually talking to, there needs to be some sort of evidence behind that. And there are cases that have been completely upturned because we knew a history about this particular individual who died in this location, and then we come into contact with it. It's clear in its communication. It says, no, actually, this is what happened to me. And we go back to try to corroborate that. And sure enough, we find physical evidence that was overlooked, whether it be documentation or otherwise, that supports that version rather than what we knew.
Right. And that does happen. I've said before. And it's kind of weird to me how people, they go into a place and they just try to contact something without knowing what's there.
Mm-hmm. I understand the ambition.
I have nothing against it, but that, to me, that's how you open yourself up to things that you may not want.
Well, that's how you fuck around and find out. You know, and
a
a lot of us have taken that path. But even for myself, early on, I wanted to feel what it was like to be in the presence of something evil. There was a thirst inside me that was searching for this. And I don't really know why. Maybe it was something I was trying to settle within myself, but I needed to be in the presence of something so austere, so impactful, so omnipresent in that sense, that I could look at myself and say, I am fully convinced that what I'm experiencing is real. And believe me, I found it. But yeah, so many people get into those spots, and you hear about folks coming back with attachments they don't know what to do with. They weren't prepared for this. You have to exert a little bit of intelligence going into these places, and God damn it, do your research on the location first.
Yes. The only, Mike, so I am a huge researcher. I'm going to show you this. This is my research folder at Medfield State Hospital.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Impressive.
Like when I research, I research.
He does.
And I even
I love
have
that.
I even have a separate folder that has all the names of the people that are buried in the cemetery on site.
That's awesome, man.
So, like,
He's the researcher. I'm telling you.
I have every property record from, I think, 1909 up until 1956.
You remind me of Brian Minnick from Montauk is Strange. He's very much in the same vein of just gathering everything he can, physical and non.
Right. So when it comes to opening yourself up for attachments, right? I feel like you can concur with me on this, or you might not. We'll see. So I feel so many people that get attachments and they come home and they might have something negative attached to them. They're too quick to label it a demon without thinking about the plausibility that, hey, if someone was a nasty person in life, they're going to leave behind a nasty residue. Just because you bring something home with you that can bite you or scratch you does not necessarily mean you brought home a demon. Am I correct on that?
I think so, because, I can trap a wild animal, bring it into my house, and it might act the same way, but I'm physically seeing it, and that's the difference.
Mm-hmm.
It may be feral. Some of these energies are better left alone, but some of them are more curious. I mean, I lived in a house that had a very nasty entity in it, and yes, you could call it poltergeist activity, and it did everything from cause sleep apnea to bothering my child at the time, in a very audible way. And yet I felt at the end of all that this was a human spirit that was just so disheveled and locked in some sort of negative cycle, that this is expressing itself from that side of reality. And yet anybody else might come in there and say, oh yeah, that's a demon, that's demonic. I can't give labels like that unless I have something behind what that actually means, and definitely outside of any sort of religious context.
Right. No, that's fair. And I feel like just so many people are so quick to label something a demon because they don't understand that, a human spirit can scratch you too. A human spirit can bite you too. I have been bitten. I've been scratched. I have been punched in the eye. I had a black eye after an investigation down in Alabama once.
Wow.
Human spirits can physically contact you as well. It doesn't mean it's demonic.
I think that's 100% accurate. And, again, the way people inform themselves and educate themselves about these type of energies, it's more of a loose sort of empirical sense of research, because we don't have definitive answers, but we can make corroborations and we can connect certain lines that create a much bigger picture. And we see this even in the Black projects. Montauk is a very big example of that, and what Brian Minnick has been able to do is create a lot of these connections, and I've come up with some of them myself, but it again paints a larger picture of what actually is, that is undeniable.
Right. I can agree with that. 100%. So I see that we are running. We got about 3 minutes left. So, Mike, at the end of every single show, I ask my guest 3 questions, and 2 of them are multi-part questions. So I am looking forward to your answer here. I feel like every single paranormal investigator out there has a small bucket list, right, of places that they want to go. So if you had to choose one location off of your bucket list and price was not an issue, where are you going?
Waverly Hills, or there's another one down in Pennsylvania. I can't remember the name of it. It's a psychiatric institution. It eludes me at the moment. Yes, it is Penhurst. Thank you.
Yeah,
those two would be
are
my answer.
Both great locations. So for the sake of argument, I'm just going to go with Penhurst because it's closer, and I like Penhurst. I've never been there, but I want to go myself. So, Mike, you're going to Penhurst. You can bring one person with you, alive or dead, and they do not have to be involved in the paranormal. Who are you bringing with you to investigate Penhurst, and why?
My sister, because she's also very intuitive. She's come along with me for a lot of these excursions, especially moving back to Connecticut over the last 6-7 months. Together, we've hit up a lot of different places, and she shares the same excitement and ambition for that type of exploration, and really respects the history of what we get into, not just, hey, we're going to see something paranormal. I mean, sometimes we just go to a historical place or an abandoned spot to do a little bit of that sleuthing. But she has the same drive as I do, but just, she doesn't express it outwardly the way I do publicly. I'm sort of the face of that, but she behind me is another energy that's very supportive in this, and that's who I would bring.
I like it. I like it. So we're going to Penhurst. You're taking your sister with you. So your abilities aside, those are inherent to you. You can bring one piece of equipment with you. What piece of equipment are you bringing with you and your sister to use, and why?
Just one, huh? Jeez.
Just one.
EVP recorder.
Fair. Okay.
Yeah.
Could you explain why exactly?
Yeah. I would go with an EVP recorder because I find that sometimes we can, in a much easier fashion, capture entire sentences or sometimes paragraphs rather than just a word from an ovulus or a spirit box that we're now sitting back and trying to interpret. I've had better experiences analyzing EVPs than any other piece of auditory equipment that I think is available to us, at least in a mainstream sense, for ghost investigation. So, I mean, there's more that you can do with an EVP recorder than just capture those sounds. I mean, there's a lot in terms of this. So that's the piece of equipment that I would certainly take.
I like it. So, would you, when it comes to EVP recorders, right? Real quick side question. We're going on a side quest here, real quick. So, do you prefer digital or do you prefer analog?
I think both of them have their advantages and disadvantages, but I do believe at the end of the day, they both act very similar in terms of what you're able to capture. The way that they may do this is obviously inherently different. And I think that having something physical, like a magnetic strip that comes with an analog tape, there's something to that. And obviously my research into vacuum tubes and analog equipment, there's always an esoteric backing to this. Even going into orgone energy and how that relates to certain devices, especially receivers and transmitters. So that's sort of what I have in mind for that.
I like it. I like it. So, Mike, once again, thank you so much for coming on the show, talking with us for an hour. You are such a smart dude, and the way that you articulate things, like I can't thank you enough for coming on the show.
Yes,
well,
thank you so much
for having me. Yeah, I appreciate you both, and I knew it was going to be a good time. It always is, especially, I mean, I've had experiences with Gwen here, but I've been waiting to get together with you, Nathan, and when you invited me on, I was very excited. I appreciate the kind words and the opportunity to talk to your audience.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for coming on, and I will be seeing you in a few weeks, Michael, at the Salem Paranormal and Horror Convention.
Yep, I'll be there also.
You bet.
But Gwen, we're not talking about you right now.
Hey now, hey, I'm bringing his little girlfriend Haunted Doll with me on the
look forward to seeing her again.
Yep, and
But
I want to
also-
get some kind of something going on there on video. I want to see it.
Michael, if you wouldn't mind hanging out in the background for just a second while I give the outro, I always have one follow-up question that I ask my guests off air.
Sure. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the show, and I will talk to you in just a minute.
All right.
So that, guys, was the Paranormal Mr. Michael Roser. So let me tell you, this dude, listening to him talk, I could listen to how he speaks for hours just because of how he talks. The way that he could string words together and put it so eloquently. Yes, I used a dictionary word there. It's fascinating to me. It's amazing. But guys, that was the Paranormal Unveiled podcast, the Thanksgiving episode with Mr. Michael Roser. And I will see you guys next week. Same spooky time, same spooky network. Y'all have a good night.
Good night.